Molly Jacobs was average 15-year-old girl. She was going through hormonal changes, constantly rebelling, and frequently clashed with her mother. Linda, her mom, always attempted to micromanage Molly's life, dictating what she should and shouldn't do, disliking her friends, and even criticizing her fashion choices. Essentially, Linda was a control freak. She never truly listened to Molly, neglecting to inquire about her interests or how school was going, and she was oblivious to Molly's closest friends. Despite Linda's intentions to steer Molly towards what she deemed best, their relationship suffered greatly. While Molly appreciated her mother's concern, she knew that what was best for Linda wasn't necessarily what was best for her. On the flip side, Molly's dad, Jim, or Jimmy, as everyone knew him, possessed an unwavering calmness and learned early on not to sweat the small stuff. Jimmy actively encouraged Molly to embrace her individuality, as long as it didn't damage herself or others. No euphoria things, physical engaging, bullying, lies, or omissions. Whether it was dyeing her hair blue or getting a nose piercing, Jimmy was supportive, even signing off on permission slips. While gentle, Jimmy had two non-negotiable rules: no lying and always staying faithful. He emphasized the importance of expressing feelings openly, speaking directly, and avoiding secrecy. "Molly," he'd say, "secrets can corrode your personality and life. They always come out eventually, causing more damage the longer they're kept hidden." His loyalty rule extended to being true to one's morals and ethics, staying loyal to friends, guiding them toward better decisions, and offering support. Jimmy's integrity and sociability earned him many friends and bolstered his reputation as a copyright lawyer in a high-tech law firm where he was a partner. Despite his demanding career, Jimmy prioritized attending Molly's soccer and softball games, along with any school events she participated in. He made sure to carve out time for activities like walking, biking, fishing, kayaking, and camping with Molly, recognizing her swift passage into adulthood and the limited time they had together. While Linda, his wife, occasionally joined, she often skipped these outings. As a result, Molly and her father formed an exceptionally close bond, which occasionally stirred a hint of jealousy in Linda. Every Wednesday, Linda had her day off, often mentioning to Jimmy and Molly that she'd spend it cooking, doing housework, shopping, or possibly visiting her parents. Upon Molly's return home, she frequently spotted Jimmy's older brother Dan driving past in his pickup truck, giving the impression he had just been at their house. When Molly questioned Linda about Uncle Dan's visits, Linda sometimes denied them despite his truck being parked nearby. Other times, Linda explained Dan's presence as related to landscaping inquiries, borrowing tools from Jimmy, or simply checking if Jimmy was home to have a chat. Molly found these explanations a bit odd. Linda typically arrived home before Molly finished school, around 5:30 p.m. after sports practice, and always before Jimmy, who arrived anywhere between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. one school day. Shortly after lunch, around 12:30 p.m., Molly began experiencing severe menstrual cramps. Seeking relief, she asked her teacher to see the nurse and successfully convinced her to let her go home early. Despite trying to reach her mother, Linda, by phone, Molly received no answer and eventually left a brief voicemail explaining her situation and indicating she would walk home unless Linda could pick her up. However, Linda never returned the call. As Molly approached her street, she noticed Uncle Dan's truck parked in the driveway, assuming he might need more tools. Upon reaching the door, she found it locked, which struck her as odd. Using her keys to enter, Molly discovered the ground floor deserted and dark. After a quick check of the garage revealed no sign of Uncle Dan, she heard strange noises upstairs. Curiosity piqued. Molly quietly ascended the stairs and made her way to her parents' bedroom. She peeked around the doorframe and was stunned to see her mom, Linda, having closeness with Uncle Dan. They both moaned. She quickly backed away in shock and tears. She didn't know what to do, but when the anger over her uncles and her mother's betrayal of Jimmy's father sunk into her mind, she became angry, very angry. She looked around again, this time with her phone and video camera on. Linda and Dan, not noticing Molly, continued their debauchery.
"Screw me, you dirty boy, and don't stop!"
she screamed. Dan responded,
"I enjoy being carnal with you, and I'll satisfy you better than little Jimmy ever did."
They shared a laugh, but it infuriated Molly. When Molly burst into the room, she yelled,
"You're cheating, you worthless fancy woman! How could you betray our family like this? And you, Uncle Dan, sleeping with your own brother's wife! I despise both of you, you pathetic excuses for human beings!"
Both Dan and Linda looked around, startled by Molly's sudden presence, then recoiled in horror when they noticed her filming and shouting at them. Molly dashed out of the room and down the stairs. Linda cried out.
Oh God, no, Molly, wait, please come back. This isn't what it seems. Please, Molly, let's talk.
She hurried down the hallway after Molly, but Molly had already left through the front door by the time Linda reached the stairs. Linda rushed back and told Dan,
Get dressed and start the truck. We need to find her. We have to stop her from telling Jimmy. It'll ruin him, and he'll retaliate against both of us. Oh God, what have I done?
She broke down in tears, and Dan yelled, Fine, you can cry and feel guilty later, but right now get dressed. We need to leave. Molly dashed through the yards. Her phone buzzed. It was Linda. Ignoring the call, Molly let it go to voicemail. She sprinted to the 9 Mile Creek nature trails, where she and her dad often walked and jogged. Nestled among 5 towering cottonwood trees was their favorite spot, dubbed Our Trees. Sometimes they raced to reach it first. Huddled behind those trees, Molly wept, her head buried in her knees.
How could Mom do this to Dad and her?
And Uncle Dan, betraying his own brother Jimmy with his wife. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with these thoughts. She brushed off her mother's attempts to reach her. She couldn't bear to talk, not now, maybe not ever. In moments like these, she always sought solace in her father. At this point, Linda had phoned Molly numerous times but hadn't received any response. Upon encountering Molly's voicemail, she promptly replied, explaining her unwellness, her departure from school, and her quest for a car. While in the company of Dan engaged in kissing and caressing, Linda disregarded the incoming calls, presuming they were likely from Jimmy. She dreaded the prospect of her husband interrupting their carnal moment. Despite experiencing a mix of guilt, desire, and excitement from the illicit thrill, Linda had been having an affair with Dan on Wednesdays behind Jimmy's back for roughly 10 weeks. She recognized the necessity of ending it, seeing how it impacted her family ties and endangered her marriage. Though aware of the potential marital catastrophe if discovered, she lacked the resolve to break it off with Dan. She rationalized her actions, viewing them as personal indulgence and convincing herself they wouldn't damage Jimmy. It didn't appear to disrupt her marriage overtly, yet she failed to grasp the emotional barrier it erected with her family, likely stemming from guilt. If only she could compel herself to ponder the probable consequences. How could she risk everything that truly mattered to her, now consumed by self-loathing for her deeds? Or perhaps she resented being caught. There wasn't time to dissect it all now, but she feared delving deeper to comprehend why she took such a gamble. With her daughter branding her a disgrace and fleeing, she began to grasp the wide-reaching damage her actions caused, including to herself. She couldn't fathom how she allowed it to unfold. Her love for Jimmy and Molly surpassed all else, and she understood this affair spelled ruin for her marriage. But she found herself unable to resist the allure of her clandestine desires. Now she couldn't bear the thought of the potential repercussions for her family, realizing she had shattered the lives of the man and daughter she cherished, as well as her own. Frantically, she dialed Molly, leaving messages in a desperate attempt to persuade her not to disclose what Molly had witnessed to Jimmy, fearing it would devastate him. Despite Linda's efforts, Molly continued to disregard her calls and opted to reach out to her father instead. Upon his second ring, he answered. "Hey there, little rebel. What's going on? Shouldn't you be in school? Are you all right?" Jimmy heard his daughter's tearful sobs, clearly in distress. "Molly, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Where are you? And where's your mother?" "Dad, please hurry. I need you. I'm by the trees. Don't let Mom know or answer her calls until you're here. Please." "Molly, what caused the big fight between you and Linda? Are you all right? What's going on?" "Just come, Dad, hurry. No calls to or from Mom. Please, just come. I'm okay, but I really need you now, okay? Stay put and take care of yourself. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jimmy dashed out of his office, opting not to waste time explaining to Beth, simply stating one client had a breakdown. "We'll have to postpone tomorrow. I'll fill you in later." He bolted to his SUV, ignoring Linda's incoming call as promised to Molly. He let it go to voicemail, started the car, and drove across town. Arriving at the parking lot, he leaped out of the car and sprinted down the path in his formal attire. Spotting Molly curled up among the trees, tears streaming, he rushed to her side. "Molly! Molly, what happened?" She threw herself into his embrace, sobbing uncontrollably, her body trembling with emotion. He comforted her, stroking her hair and back until she gradually calmed down. "Molly, did someone hurt you? What's wrong? Did you and your mom have a disagreement?" Linda's calls continued to come through, with 10 missed calls already on Molly's phone. As his phone rang again, with Linda on the line once more, Jimmy hesitated to answer, but Molly intervened. "Don't pick up. We need to talk." Dad, I'm lost. You always said to speak the truth. Be loyal to family and not keep secrets that eat you up inside. But what if the truth makes things worse? What if it destroys people? What do we do next, Dad? Molly, I can see you're deeply upset and struggling. It's best to confront the painful truth openly, where family and friends can provide support and help us through. Okay, Dad. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. Did Mom call you? If she did she leave a voicemail? Let's listen, please. Jimmy gave her a puzzled look, but accessed Linda's voicemail. Jimmy, we need to talk. Molly and I had an argument, and she ran off. She's obviously upset, and I don't think she fully understands what she saw that upset her so much. I'm trying to find her. Can you call me and let me know where she might be, or ask her to call me? Jimmy, please know that I love only you and Molly, and I always will. It seemed an odd way to end the message, but Jimmy set it aside and focused on Molly. She let out a sarcastic snort upon hearing the message. Now let me play mine. She played Linda's first voicemail, where Linda could be heard crying as she said, Molly, it's not what you think. It means nothing. It's just an innocent and meaningless action. Please call me and discuss this before doing something rash. Please talk to me before talking to your father. And again, Molly remarked, Just an innocent action? Jimmy gazed at her with confusion, about to inquire, but Molly urged, Dad, please be patient. Let's listen to Mom's next voicemail. She hit play, and Linda's tone sounded pleading. Molly, please talk to me. Don't tell anyone, especially your father. It will shatter him and our family. Hearing this, Molly erupted in anger, exclaiming, Screw you, Mom! You're saying I'm tearing apart the family? What a load of crap! You've got some nerve blaming me! Jimmy, utterly bewildered, interjected, Molly, you have to start from the beginning and explain everything. Dad, are you sure? Molly questioned. You heard her. This will ruin our family, although I think Mom has already done that. Jimmy met her gaze and insisted, Molly, you can't hold back now. Let's get to the bottom of this for heaven's sake. What happened? I'm so sorry, Dad. I wasn't feeling well at school, so I decided to head home and tried calling Mom multiple times, but her phone was off. When I got home, Uncle Dan's truck was in the driveway. The front door was locked, so I let myself in and found no one downstairs. I heard noises from your bedroom, so I quietly went upstairs. I'm sorry for you, for me, for our family. I think it's best to watch this video. Handing the phone to her father, she bowed her head to her knees and began to cry softly. Jimmy played the video again, and Molly's painful experience unfolded in vivid detail. It ended with her cry of anguish and her words to Linda and Dan, snapping them out of their closeness. Their expressions upon seeing Molly were difficult to witness, a mix of fading pleasure, then shock, fear, shame, guilt, and anger. In less than 5 seconds, Jimmy turned off the phone, his head now bowed as tears streamed down his face. Why, God! How could she do this to us? And with my brother? How could they betray and shame me like this? He couldn't muster more words. Molly drew closer, embracing him, and declared, I feel the same betrayal and shock. I never want to see them again. I despise them for what they've done to us, to you, for tearing our family apart. Meanwhile, Linda attempted to reach Jimmy at his office, but the receptionist informed her he had left abruptly to meet with a client and wouldn't be back that day. She offered to take a message and suggested Linda call him directly to ensure he was aware of her urgent need to speak with him. Linda muttered a refusal and hung up. Dan and Linda abandoned their search for Molly, returning home to find the house dark, Jimmy's car absent, and little chance of Molly returning. Linda, I hope Molly doesn't do anything reckless. I hope she doesn't confide in Jimmy. You know he'll never forgive us for this. I suppose I should head home before Amanda wonders where I am, and I'll just have to wait and see how this unfolds. Damn it! How could we be so foolish? Linda struggled to speak amid her sobs. Take me home, Dan. I need to figure out what to tell Molly. I must reach her before Jimmy does. I have to persuade her it means nothing. If she tells Jimmy, our lives are over. With that, she dialed Molly's number once more, only to reach voicemail again. Molly, she exclaimed into the phone. Molly, I'm deeply sorry. Please understand it meant nothing and it's over. Please call me before you talk to anyone. Please don't tell Jimmy. It will ruin us all. With those words, Linda exited the car and headed back to the house. She attempted to call Molly again, knowing there would be no answer. Rushing to the master bedroom, she stripped off the sheets and replaced them with fresh ones. This had become her routine every Wednesday after Dan departed over the past 10 weeks. Sitting on the bed, she broke down in tears. Why did I do this? Why would I jeopardize my marriage and family's respect for this? Come to think of it, she didn't even particularly like Dan. Certainly she didn't love him. Her love for Jimmy never wavered. Yet upon reflection, she recognized how she had started to emotionally distance herself from both him and her daughter. Why was she constantly nitpicking at Molly? When did she stop communicating openly and affectionately with Jimmy? When was the last time she made love to him and expressed any genuine affection or connection? What is wrong with her? She pondered deeply on these questions. A lot of the thrill came from doing something secretly behind my family's back. That was just for me. Even though it was wrong, that's what made it so thrilling. My life felt mundane. It seemed like no one else relied on me. Molly distanced herself and ended our once open, loving relationship. Jimmy had no room for worries, focused on his fast-paced legal career. He prioritized Molly, especially after his wife emotionally pushed him away. He knew their closeness was lacking, but when he suggested seeking help, Linda insisted everything was fine. It seemed she felt he emotionally retreated. It appeared Jimmy didn't need her. Now she sees it was her mistake. Dan praised her allure and how much he valued her. He couldn't find the same connection with his pregnant wife, Amanda, as he did with Linda. Amanda's pregnancy meant less attention for him at home. Dan's flattery and constant compliments about her beauty led to them getting close. Soon, their interactions escalated to passionate, intense closeness. Now, Linda recalled the pain and betrayal evident on Molly's face. Molly had labeled her a cheap strumpet, a sentiment Linda couldn't dispute. She reflected on Amanda, Dan, and Jimmy's bond, as well as his parents. Why did it take me so long to see how awful this is? I've wrecked my life without considering the repercussions or my motives. Overwhelmed, she collapsed on the bed, sobbing uncontrollably until exhaustion claimed her. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Molly lingered near the trees, occasionally exchanging words through their tears. What's our next move, Dad? Molly, I'm at a loss. I'm consumed with anger and hurt, not just from being betrayed by the woman I loved and shared my life with, but also by my own brother, my lifelong ally. Now you're caught in this turmoil, aware that our family will never be the same. I'm not sure I can even face Linda, let alone forgive her. But she's your mother, and you'll always need a relationship with her, even if it's hard to grasp right now. Let's find a hotel room to gather ourselves, get some rest, and tackle our feelings tomorrow. They headed to the Hilton Hotel's center and secured a room. Jimmy planned to work remotely from there the next day and informed the school that Molly was unwell, giving them time to figure out their next steps. Over the weekend, Jimmy reached out to his friend Jack Wilson, the city's district attorney, briefing him on the situation. He informed Jack that Linda might file a missing persons report soon and requested that Jack delay any action, knowing Molly was safe with him and they'd reconnect soon. Reluctantly, Jack agreed, setting a deadline for Monday, urging Jimmy to speak with Linda before then. At the Hilton, Molly and Jimmy settled in, ordering burgers and fries. They then vegged out in front of the TV until sleep eventually overtook them, if only briefly. Around 10 p.m., Linda awoke to find no call back from Molly or Jimmy.
Oh God, no, she panicked. Jimmy's gotta know. Otherwise, he'd have reached out or come home by now. What have I done?
She tried calling both Molly and Jimmy again, but their phones went straight to disconnected voicemails. Desperate, she messaged Jimmy. Jimmy, I think you're aware, but no, it means nothing. I love only you. Please confirm Molly's safety and come home so we can talk. I need to explain. Uncertain of how Jimmy would react or what he'd want to hear, she began crafting her side of the story, preparing to face him. She waited until midnight, hoping for a call or text. With no reply, she finally retreated under the covers, attempting to sleep. The night was restless and tear-filled, consumed by regret and guilt over her actions and the pain inflicted. Come morning, Jimmy and Molly were up early, heading to the Hilton for breakfast. Jimmy informed the school Molly would be absent for 2 days and told his workplace he'd be working remotely via cell and computer, urging them to contact him only for urgent matters. He turned to Molly, saying, Molly, I'm truly sorry you witnessed this and got pulled into this awful situation. It seems you're facing life's challenges earlier than I'd hoped at 15. I worry that you'll now understand from an adult perspective the significance of values like loyalty, honesty, and staying true to your morals and ethics. You know, life has its challenges, but it's important to stick to your own moral compass. Mom seemed to forget that when she got involved with your Uncle Daniel, and the trust and betrayal that followed can't be erased. I'm figuring out my next steps. Since we're in this together, I want you by my side to help decide our family's future. I'm calling Dan right now to get some answers." Jimmy dialed Dan's number. When Dan answered, he said, "I'll step out so Amanda isn't disturbed. We just woke up." After quickly heading downstairs and onto the porch, Dan asked, "What's up?" Jimmy's anger flared as he responded, "What do you mean, what's up? You need to be straight with me. Tell me honestly when and why you've been with my wife." Dan paused and then said, "Jimmy, I'm truly sorry. It just happened. Once we started, it kept happening. But it wasn't about you, and there's no love or real interest between us. It was purely physical, driven by lust and excitement. I regret it, Jimmy, and it didn't mean anything significant to either of us." "Jimmy, have you talked to Linda? You should ask her these questions," said Dan. "I'm asking you, man. How long?" Dan replied hesitantly, "For the past 10 weeks, Jimmy. Every Wednesday, always at your place." Jimmy yelled, "Why? How could you betray me like this, Dan?" Dan explained, "It wasn't about you. It just happened. I wasn't getting much closeness with Amanda being pregnant. I was attracted to Linda and things escalated to kissing, making out, and eventually sleeping together. I'm truly sorry. We both love you and don't want to hurt you or break up your family. Forgive you, Dan. Here's how it's going to be. I won't talk to you or see you again. If I do, you better run because I'll confront you. You're dead to me now. I don't consider you my brother anymore." Despite Dan's pleas and apologies, asking Jimmy to be understanding and not let this destroy their bond, he said, "Jimmy, it was just physical. It doesn't mean anything." "It was everything to me, Dan. You shattered my marriage and my trust in both of you. Can you grasp how deeply this hurt, Molly? So don't say it's insignificant. This shows neither of you cared enough about us to spare us this pain." Jimmy ended the call, convinced it would be his final conversation with Daniel. On Thursday and Friday, Molly and Jimmy worked in their hotel room, dined at the restaurant, and took breaks outside for fresh air. Linda kept calling, but they ignored her calls and voicemails. Worried and unsure how to reach them, Linda also tried contacting Dan, who didn't respond to any of her calls. By Friday afternoon, she went to the police station to file a missing person report. "My daughter has gone missing, and I need to file a report to find her," she told the officer at the desk. After gathering her details, including her name, her daughter's name, husband's name, and address, the officer asked her to wait. Shortly after, Jack Wilson, the district attorney, came out to speak with her. "Mrs. Jacobs, I'm a friend of your husband, Jimmy. I need you to know that Molly's fine. She's with Jimmy, who reached out to me knowing you might show up to file a missing persons report. We made a deal that I'd wait over the weekend for him to get in touch with you before we do anything official. Molly's safe with him. That's all I can say for now. He'll reach out, but if he hasn't by Monday morning, call me and I'll step in." With that, he handed her his card and guided her to the door. She felt his accusing stare and lack of regard as he escorted her out. She figured Jimmy had filled him in and realized arguing wouldn't help. She made her way to the car, sank into the seat, and let the tears flow once more. Back at the Hilton, Jimmy glanced at Molly and suggested, "Well, I think we should at least speak with your mom and let her know you're safe. Would you like to talk to her?" Molly replied, "No, Dad. I don't ever want to speak to her again. I can't see any reason to forgive what she did. Nor can I imagine any apology that would suffice. How can we even be sure she's being honest? How can we trust her again?" Jimmy responded, "Molly, we're feeling hurt, shocked, and betrayed right now. But with time, this pain will ease, and we'll need to decide whether to move forward or try to mend the family. I'm thinking maybe we should head to the house, give her the chance to come clean about the affair, and then make a decision. We'll need more clothes and toiletries if we're staying in a hotel, and you have school on Monday, so grab your backpack and books and get ready. Today's Sunday, right? Let's go there and hear her side of the story. Then we can decide whether to stay or leave with our things. It's only fair to give her the opportunity to explain. What? Why? Where? For how long?" Molly and Jimmy drove to the house and entered through the front door. The house was silent and dim, except for the light in the kitchen. They found Linda sitting there, sipping coffee and staring into her cup. She appeared to have aged significantly since they last saw her, with a swollen face dotted with red marks. Tear stains marred her partially removed eye makeup, and her hair was disheveled and unwashed. Upon spotting them, she leaped from her seat and rushed toward Molly for a hug. However, Molly pushed her away, avoiding contact, and circled around to the other side, with Jimmy following suit. "Linda, we're here to discuss what happened and why it happened. You've caused us both immense pain. Our love and trust in you are shattered. I'm not sure if there's any resolution to what Molly witnessed and recorded, but I want to hear your side of the story, at least." With tears in her eyes and a runny nose, Linda grabbed a tissue, wiped her eyes, blew her nose, and faced them. "I'm truly sorry. Please understand this has nothing to do with either of you. I love you more than anything and don't want to lose you. Jimmy, it was just a mistake. It meant nothing. It happened once, and it won't happen again. Can we work through this? Don't end our marriage over a single error and meaningless encounter." After uttering this falsehood, she turned away. When she glanced back, she saw Jimmy seething with anger. Addressing Molly, he declared, "I think we're going with Plan B." Molly left the kitchen to pack her belongings and grab her backpack. Once Molly exited the room, Jimmy turned to Linda and erupted,
"So you're sticking to the same old excuses instead of coming clean? It was just meaningless physical involving. It didn't mean anything."
"And your claim that it was a one-time thing? That just proves you're comfortable with lying and deceit."
"I spoke to Dan. I know this has been going on for 10 weeks. I even saw the video of you cheating on me with him, humiliating me in the process. So who's lying here? You or Dan? I know it's you, and I know I won't find any truth or remorse talking to you. I told Dan he's dead to me, never to be seen or spoken to again. It's not as simple with you, but that's how I feel right now. And don't tell me our marriage is ruined over one mistake. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a sustained affair you wouldn't have ended if Molly hadn't caught you. You're only concerned about getting caught. You betrayed and disrespected our family, even doing this with my brother and in our bed. So spare me the talk about me giving up on marriage. You gave up on it first, flirting and carrying on with Dan emotionally and then physically. How do you think our 15-year-old daughter will handle what she saw?" With that, Jimmy dashed upstairs to the bedroom. Linda collapsed on the floor, crying heavily. She had hoped to sway him by lying about the affair's duration and urging him to forgive her, but his fury was unprecedented. Now, she doubted any chance of reconciling with her husband and daughter, stunned by the pain and anger her betrayal had caused. A few minutes later, Molly and Jimmy descended with packed suitcases. Jimmy removed his wedding ring, placed it on the counter, and they left without a word. Linda remained curled up on the kitchen floor, weeping. Jimmy and Molly returned to the Hilton, but Jimmy began searching for apartments near the school and his office. He contacted rental agencies and secured a 6-month lease on a modern 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with amenities like a landscaped pool, spa, BBQ grills, tables, and a gym. The following morning, Jimmy took Molly to school, returned, and started moving their modest belongings into the new apartment. He promptly organized his finances, separating pre-tax savings, checks, and joint accounts into individual accounts, one in his name and the other in Linda's. Then, he reached out to a reputable divorce lawyer for an appointment later that day. His financial advisors informed him that, due to the college funds he'd set up for his daughter, he could allocate a significant portion of their joint savings and investments into a trust for her education, safeguarded from any divorce settlement. He also designated Molly as the beneficiary of his insurance. After 10 days of strategizing, the divorce plan and its financial adjustments were finalized. He instructed his lawyer to begin drafting the divorce papers, but held off filing until further notice. Meanwhile, over the past 10 days, Linda persistently reached out to Molly and Jimmy via calls and texts, imploring them to communicate, attend marriage counseling, and return home. Jimmy instructed his office security to prevent her access to the premises. Molly approached the school's vice principal, explaining the situation and persuading them to bar Linda from the school grounds. Around this time, Molly received a perplexing voicemail from Linda's parents, expressing confusion as to why Molly and Jimmy were treating their daughter poorly over a minor disagreement. They criticized their departure in silence, questioning their perceived cruelty. Molly opted to reach out to Jimmy's parents to see if they had any updates. She dialed their number and greeted, "Hi, Grandma. How have you been? Have you heard from the family lately? Anything new? I know it's been a while since we last saw each other." They replied that there wasn't much to report, just awaiting the arrival of Dan and Amanda's baby, inviting Linda, Jimmy, and Molly to brunch the following weekend when Dan and Amanda were visiting. Molly realized then that the family was in the dark about the situation. Linda hadn't disclosed the truth to her parents, and apparently Dan hadn't informed Amanda or their parents either. Later that evening, Jimmy received a call from Linda's sister, Sherry, expressing dismay over his departure, citing the disagreement about Molly's schoolwork as a trivial reason to leave Linda. "How could you do this, Jimmy? This isn't like you at all."
Jimmy simply explained that there were personal matters between him and Linda that needed time to resolve. 20 minutes later, Linda's parents echoed Sherry's sentiment, questioning Jimmy's decision to leave over minor disputes. And to cap the night, Jimmy's parents called, inviting Linda, Jimmy, and Dan over for brunch. Molly observed Jimmy's efforts to dodge accusations, realizing neither Linda nor Dan had divulged the truth. Turning to Jimmy, Molly remarked, "Clearly, neither Linda nor Dan told the family anything close to the truth, and somehow it's your fault." She was livid, but her father shrugged, insisting things would sort themselves out. 2 weeks later, after much introspection and discussion with Molly, Jimmy concluded that he couldn't forgive Linda's betrayal, her deception, and her refusal to acknowledge breaking her wedding vows. It was evident she took no responsibility, nor did Dan. Jimmy decided it was over and instructed his lawyers to serve Linda with divorce papers. At home, Linda contemplated how to persuade Jimmy and Molly to return so she could mend their relationship. Despite knowing she had hurt them, she tried convincing herself it was merely meaningless closeness and that everything could return to normal. She reassured herself they'd miss her and come back, envisioning herself as the most loving wife and mother upon their return. While pondering how to initiate a conversation with Jimmy, she heard a car pull up and moments later a knock on the door. Peering out the window, she spotted a young man in a suit. Answering the door cautiously, she confirmed her identity. Handing her an 8 by 11-inch folder, the young man announced, "Mrs. Jacobs, you have been served," before swiftly taking a photo of her with the package and returning to his car. Confused by his words, Linda retreated to the living room, sank into the sofa, and tore open the envelope. Extracting the documents, she choked back tears at the sight of petition for divorce atop the first page. As the realization dawned on her, she dropped the papers, acknowledging for the first time that she had forsaken her marriage and family for meaningless closeness. A few days after receiving the divorce petition, Jimmy found himself bombarded with calls. Both Linda's and his own parents accused him of ending the marriage over trivial disagreements. Then came a call from Dan's wife, Amanda, reproaching him. "Jimmy, how can you cut ties with Dan over tool arguments? And considering divorcing Linda over such minor issues? You need help, Jimmy. Perhaps counseling." Jimmy attempted to deflect their inquiries, reiterating that this was a private matter involving Linda, Molly, and himself. He suggested they speak to Linda directly if they sought understanding about the lack of reconciliation and the necessity of divorce. Yet, their incessant calls persisted. They began contacting Molly with the same pleas, urging her to return home to her heartbroken mother. Witnessing Jimmy's anguish and the family's vilification of him, Molly realized Dan hadn't divulged the truth and instead attributed his disputes with Jimmy to the loss of some of Jimmy's tools. Molly observed Linda's attempts to rally all available family resources in hopes of persuading Jimmy and Molly to return, noting Linda's refusal to acknowledge her actions or disclose the truth. Aware of Jimmy's integrity, Molly knew he wouldn't divulge damaging information that could rupture Linda and Dan's relationship with the family. However, Molly reached her breaking point. She opened her computer and composed an email addressed to the entire family. "To all the family members quick to blame my dad for the issues between my mom, Dan, and himself, it pains me deeply to send you the attached video. I understand it will shock and hurt you, as it did me when I walked into this nightmare and recorded it. It's unjust for Jimmy to face punishment from his own family for something he didn't do. He was betrayed by his wife, brother, and now his own family. I'm done with it. Please view this video and consider what you would do if you were in my father's position. In my position, what would you do? Imagine being betrayed by two people you trusted to love and support you unconditionally, who instead deceived you in the worst way and continued to deny it, refusing to take accountability. Please view the attached video privately. Then feel free to discuss with my mom and Uncle Dan how you believe Dad should respond." She included the entire family's email addresses, anticipating her father's intense reaction, but feeling compelled to stand by him, Linda, and Dan. With a click of the submit button, she sent the email. While Linda was at work, she missed her personal email, and her phone remained off as she left the building and entered her car in the parking lot. At day's end, she switched on her phone, hoping for a response from Jimmy to her numerous calls throughout the day, pleading for forgiveness and urging him to allow her to explain and reconcile. Instead, she noticed she had missed calls from her parents, Amanda and Jimmy's parents. She started by listening to Amanda's voicemail. "You're despicable. Not only did you destroy Jimmy's life with your affair with Dan, but you've also shattered mine. I don't ever want to speak to you again, and I'll support Jimmy fully in the divorce. He treated you with love and respect, doing everything for his family, and you've thrown it all away with your disgraceful behavior. Maybe Dan will take you in since he's getting kicked out tonight." Linda wasn't entirely sure if Dan had confessed or what had happened, but she had an uneasy feeling that the family knew what really happened. The next voice message was from my mother. "Linda, how could you? It was so disgusting and painful for me to watch this video and with brother Jimmy and in your marital bed." And then poor Molly comes in and sees how her mother and uncle disgustingly betray her father, herself, and the whole family. "Why did you do that?" Linda sank into the driver's seat, tears streaming down her face. Pulling out her iPhone, she reluctantly opened her email to find a message from Molly. Despite her reluctance, she clicked on the attached video, knowing all too well what she would see. It wasn't just the graphic content that disturbed her. It was the sound of Dan's voice, clear as day, engaging in those acts all over again. "Screw me, you filthy boy, and don't you dare stop!" she shrieked. Dan responded, "I love making love to you, and I'll satisfy you better than little Jimmy ever could." And if that weren't sufficient, it was the way they chuckled together and shared their cruel jest. And then, of course, came Molly's anguish, shock, and fury as she yelled, "You're a deceitful strumpet! How could you betray our family like this? And you, Uncle Dan, slept with your own brother's wife. I detest you both, you worthless scum!" Linda realized it was the end. Her attempts to get her family to help and to get Jimmy to talk to her and change his mind were gone forever. What was running through her mind? More falsehoods, more disrespect, and an unwillingness to acknowledge that their actions might be as injurious as the forbidden relationship itself. She came to the realization that she was only fooling herself. With Jimmy, there was no looking back. He was deeply offended, too much so, and she understood that she had permanently severed any close, loving bond with her daughter. She no longer had the privilege to even pretend to be a parent to her. Any counsel or guidance she offers will ring hollow, a mere facade of hypocrisy. She wept for an hour in the parking lot before summoning the strength to start the car and drive home. 3 weeks later, Jimmy's attorney phoned, informing her that since she hadn't signed or returned the divorce papers, he had arranged a court hearing in 2 weeks. He advised her to secure legal representation and get ready. On the recommendation of a friend who had experienced infidelity and divorce, Linda sought out a divorce lawyer. She candidly disclosed her actions with Dan and how she found herself in this situation. After reviewing the paperwork, the lawyer informed her, "Your husband is being quite fair in proposing a 50-50 split of assets. There doesn't seem to be any attempt to hide assets or inflict damage by releasing the video, except for one stipulation. He's seeking sole custody of your daughter. This is seldom granted by the court. Therefore, I suggest we contest this aspect in court and let the judge decide." In court, it marked the first sighting of Molly or Jimmy in 8 weeks for Linda. They appeared refreshed, with Molly seeming older and more mature than Linda remembered. Neither Jimmy nor Molly acknowledged her presence, and when she attempted to converse with them in the hallway, they simply walked away. "I'm deeply sorry. Please don't hold on to hatred forever. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but the idea of you despising me indefinitely is unbearable. If you could find any semblance of a relationship in your heart, I'd be immensely grateful." With these words, they proceeded into the courtroom, and the trial commenced. When the issue of 100% custody arose, the judge hesitated and leaned towards a standard 50-50 arrangement. At that juncture, Jimmy's attorney signaled to Molly, prompting the judge to address her directly. "Before I make a final ruling, my client's daughter wishes to speak with you briefly." The judge acknowledged the unusual request, but allowed it due to her age. Molly stepped forward, and both attorneys approached the bench to listen. "Your Honor," Molly addressed the judge, "I don't want to live with my mother. She's damaged our relationship beyond repair. If you grant her custody, I'll run away. I won't spend a single night at her place. I urge you to watch this brief video to see what I encountered when I came home early from school one day. The man in the video is my uncle, my father's brother. This has been going on for 3 months, and it might not have stopped if they hadn't been caught." With these words, she played the video on her phone and handed it to the judge. His demeanor shifted as he watched. Returning the phone, he asked everyone to take their seats. "I'll grant 100% custody to the father as requested," he announced. "Consequently, there'll be no child support from the mother, and given the father's income, I won't require her to pay child support either. However, regarding visitation, the mother will have a 2-hour weekly visit with her daughter. For the first 6 months, these visits will include counseling sessions paid for by the father. His attendance is optional. The aim is to explore whether a relationship between mother and daughter can be established for their future benefit. With these words, the judge adjourned the court, rose, and retired to his chambers. Linda sobbed as she heard the judge's ruling granting Jimmy full custody of Molly. Yet amidst her tears, she held on to a glimmer of hope that, with the assistance of a psychologist, she could start rebuilding some semblance of a relationship with her daughter, and perhaps even with Jimmy. This was now her sole expectation in life, and she desperately wanted to ensure her daughter understood her love. Linda wished for Molly to grasp the depth of the hurt she caused, not just to Molly, Jimmy, and the family at large, but also to herself, as her affair had wrought havoc upon everyone. A year later, the counseling sessions between Linda and Molly proved fruitful. Linda gained insight into her actions, understanding why she had made the choices she did. Molly, meanwhile, could perceive the pain Linda endured, possibly even more than Jimmy and herself, although this didn't equate to forgiveness or justification for her mother's actions. Occasionally, Molly started spending weekends at Linda's apartment. Linda adapted her approach, treating Molly as an adult, allowing her autonomy in decision-making and refraining from criticizing her choices. Linda repeatedly apologized, but one day, Molly urged her to let it go. "Leave it in the past and don't bring it up again," she said. Linda tried to glean any details about Jimmy from Molly, like his appearance, relationship status, or happiness. Molly sensed Linda's deep affection for him, but understood Jimmy's unwillingness to trust or love her again. So, instead of fueling Linda's fixation on Jimmy, Molly encouraged her to explore new avenues in life, including dating. Jimmy declined counseling sessions. He reconciled with his parents and developed a close bond with Amanda and her children. Linda left Dan and was reconstructing her life. True to his word, Jimmy ignored any attempts by Dan or his parents to reconcile. If Dan attended family gatherings, Jimmy stayed away. It had been a year since Jimmy had any contact with Dan, and he was content with his decision to cut ties permanently. Last year, Jimmy prioritized his relationship with Molly above all else, placing work as a secondary concern. He abstained from dating and avoided social gatherings with friends. Molly encouraged him to embrace a new chapter in his life and consider dating again, sensing that he might be ready to re-enter the dating scene. Reflecting on her actions, Linda regretted her past behavior deeply. She chastised herself for engaging in a 10-week affair characterized by meaningless encounters. While momentarily thrilling, it wrought havoc on the lives of those she cherished most. The guilt and anguish stemming from her actions haunted her incessantly, altering her life irreversibly. Linda acknowledged the repercussions of her actions, realizing she had been foolish to disregard them. Succumbing to lust and the fleeting excitement of forbidden closeness, she forfeited the fulfilling life she once had. Confronted with the harsh realities of adult pain and challenges, she forfeited the love, trust, companionship, and happiness within her family, understanding that she could never reclaim what was lost.